Hello, everybody, and welcome to Charts with Dan. We are at the Tuesday morning of a new holiday weekend. This is the first time that the Juneteenth federal holiday has been celebrated here in the United States. We have kind of a mishmash of numbers. Some studios reported final numbers yesterday. Some studios didn't. We don't have estimated numbers for Monday as I'm doing the show here on Monday night just yet. So it's not quite what we'll see from a lot of the holidays because, it's a new one. We don't really have the standards and practices out for it just yet. But we have a lot to talk about. We have the opening of Lightyear, which was not what a lot of people thought it would be, the continuing success of Top Gun Maverick, and Jurassic World Dominion. So much to get to. Before I get to any of that, though, I want to thank, as always, my partner here on the show, Carbon Health. Carbon Health and I are great partners because we both believe in what the other one is doing. They love to partner with creative communities that are positive, and I like to think that we run a pretty positive community here. And I love partnering with them because they are invested in a mission that I care about, which is to make healthcare as accessible and affordable as possible. Carbon Health provides a lot of services. If you are in California, a lot of their clinics provide primary care services. They also do COVID testing if you're on the road and you need a test, or you need one in order to go overseas and you need a COVID test for those purposes. You can also download the Carbon Health app where you can get urgent care needs, whether you want to go in person or book a virtual appointment. So thank you, as always, to Carbon Health for being my partner here on the show. And let's look at the weekend box office, which definitely held a lot of surprises, even for me. I thought I knew how this box office weekend was going to go. I was way off, as they would say in Dumb and Dumber. Surprisingly, the number one movie for the second week in a row is Jurassic World Dominion, which had a drop off of around 60%, with an estimated, this is one of the things I don't have a final number for, estimated $58.6 million over its second three-day weekend. That 60% drop is actually almost identical to the drop that Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom had in its second weekend, and Jurassic World Dominion also opened really close to the opening number for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. So if this continues, this basically close to identical performance for both movies, then we should be looking at a final for Jurassic World Dominion somewhere in the low 400 million range, although if it drops off quicker or holds better than expected, then that can fluctuate up and down. But we're starting to get kind of a peek at what the final picture may be for this film. But the big headline this past weekend was the performance of Pixar's Lightyear. It was the first Pixar film to open in theaters since 2020, and it came in far below expectations. This is one of the movies we did have a final number for the three-day weekend, $50,577,961. We'll see what it has added on Monday, but that is coming off of a projection for some people saying up to 85 million or higher, so way off what was expected. So I guess the first question would be, why were expectations on Lightyear so high? I've said a lot of times with these movies that sometimes I don't think that the expectations are fair because they just seem random, people kind of pulling them out of nowhere. Here, though, I think that the expectation was actually pretty fair because when we look at the top 5 Pixar openings, you can see that Incredibles 2, Finding Dory, I don't think that anybody expected it to open around that range, but we see Toy Story 4. That movie opened almost exactly 3 years ago. It opened to $120.9 million. Toy Story 3 is the fourth highest opening film in Pixar history, and then Inside Out with $90 million at number 5. And so I think that expectation around $85 million, you're shedding about a third of the audience for Toy Story 4, which I think is fair for a spin-off of the franchise, but not another installment necessarily in the Toy Story franchise. And then even to put it below a movie like Inside Out, which was an original Disney film